Coming to you, undead from the crypt. This is Adelaide Horror Podcast. Adelaide Horror Podcast with Zombie Joe.
Hi and welcome to the Adelaide Horror Podcast. It's your host, Zombie Joe, and tonight's episode is number 30, and I'm celebrating Stephen King's 75th birthday, and so I'm looking at my favourite Stephen King film, Salems Lot from 1979, and I'm giving a honourable mention to Chapelwaite, which is from 2021. So happy birthday, Stephen. It's thank you for continuing still pumping out fantastic stories and horror that pretty much keeps our lights on all the time when we have to go to sleep, but and providing nightmare fuel for countless people for the past 40 years. But for me, Salem's Lot is my favourite go-to Stephen King horror film, followed very closely by Pet Sematary and It, the remake and the original. And with Pet Sematary, just the original one. I like the remake, but yeah, it didn't get up there as the original one did. So directed by Toby Hooper. Toby Hooper, you would know, did Poltergeist. He also did Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2, and he was also the writer for the remake, the current one from 2020 as well. The writers, well, basically Stephen King was the novelist on this one, but the screenplay was done by Paul Monash, and he's done a lot of classic 50s movies that I won't really get into. I'll just give you a heads up now. A lot of the cast in this, because it's a 70s movie, these were kind of stars in the 50s and 60s, and so a lot of their film credits are these 50s and 40s movies and 60s movies, that like westerns and dramas and all this kind of stuff that we the viewer haven't really looked at realistically, and so it's not being disrespectful to them. It's just I can't bang on for 10-15 minutes on someone's film credits if no one has even seen these films. But they were big hitters at the time, and so I really showed you how this really well prepared and directed script got a lot of attention from a lot of actors and actresses that wanted to come on board with this, and then you just finally put the tie on the bow on the top with Toby Hooper just kind of cleaning it all up and making a really decent horror film. It was released in the 17th and the 24th of November 1979, so it was shown a week. So can you imagine, like, you would have been so pumped. Like, this is, I mean, people 40 plus know what it's like to sit and wait a whole week for the next episode to come in, and you're basically, pumping the britches just to see your next episode, because you're so excited, especially if it's a two-parter and you're just like, oh my God. So for the whole week at school, or your friends on the schoolyard, or at home, or you talk to your parents and your friends, like, what was going to happen, and which is just unheard of now with the binging culture that we have. Released on the 17th and 24th of November 79. The first episode did so well that the second episode had picked up so much momentum that people talked about it, that the viewing for the second episode on the ratings just went through the ceiling. And I'm not sure if there was other TV shows or competitive channels, but they were just blown out of the water that night, because everyone wanted to see episode 2 of Salem's Lot to see what happened. And so it was very successful in that sense, and also they loved it too because the amount of advertising that went into commercials while this movie was being played, and then those companies reporting back how well they did because of the time slot. And so it was an interesting thing to read into and research how that kind of grossed out. but we didn't get to see it in Australia until like the 20th of March 1980. I don't know what format that would have been in, whether it was released as a movie at the cinema, and then I've got a feeling it was released here on TV the same way. But mate, 20th of March 1980, I was like 7 or 8 months old, so I couldn't help you on that one. I remember watching it on TV, but this was like years later, man. Like I was a little tacker, so we're talking like maybe 85, 1986. It was shown on TV again, but like late at night, so you had to kind of tape it in order to watch it, and it was heavily watered down anyway. So yeah. The streaming one, it was a bit funny because I've got my own copy of it, but I tried to look around, and yeah, you're not going to get much luck with this. YouTube is renting it for like about $4. So if you want to get a good quality rental version of this, $4 would be the way to go, and you can get it done on YouTube. IMDb, mate, I'm amazed they didn't give a shit score this time, but my score is 9 out of 10 for this one. The runtime is 3 hours and 20 minutes. It's rated PG, and for first time horror, absolutely. Like this is absolutely utterly terrifying at the same time, but not enough to make a person who's not really seen a horror movie before rock in the corner. Like, you know, it's one of those weird ones to explain, like because yeah, you could show it as a first time horror film. Like, again, discretion, you know, just gauge a person that you want to show it to. If they're really gonna jump through your ceiling, I wouldn't do it. But if they've seen maybe a horror film or something a bit kooky and spooky and kind of held up okay, then yeah, I reckon you could do this one. And what helps is that it is the 70s, so it's kind of, 70s color horror movie. It kind of, you get a bit desensitized. You're kind of, okay, I'm here on my couch in 2022, for fuck's sake. Like, nothing's going to happen to me. But like, if you're watching this in the 80s or in the 70s, this would have freaked the absolute bejesus out of you. So moving on to the cast now. So basically I've split the cast up into just by how the movie flowed. So you've got your main characters, you've got your good characters, you've got your neutral characters, and then you've got your bad characters. And so the main characters that are kind of in the good category is Ben Mears, played by David Soul, and you would know him from basically Starsky and Hutch. This was his breakout movie. He'd been in Starsky and Hutch for so long, he wanted to break out into a film. This came up, he jumped at the charts. So, funnily enough, the way this movie is, if you kind of really look at it, Salem's Lot is almost like a 3-hour long episode of like Scooby-Doo and Starsky and Hutch. Like, it's kind of unintentionally ended up unintentionally being in a 3-hour Starsky and Hutch fucking episode, and that it just involved a vampire. Like, so I thought that was quite funny, but anyway, and so yeah. It is what it is, but yeah, still enjoyable. Lance Kerwin played Mark Petrie. He was the young kid. Good characters. So these are the older adults. So you got Ed Flanders. I've already done that joke for Exorcist 3, so I'm not going to repeat it here. But he plays Dr. Norton, and again, like you see him later on in Exorcist 3 with the Mike Whitney hair. So Bonnie Bedelia, well, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but my major crush from Die Hard anyway, she plays Susan Norton, and you also know her again from Die Hard and from Parenthood as well. Constable Gillespie is played by Kenneth McMillan. You would know him, he was in June. June. It sounded like I said June then. I can't remember if I did or not. Dune. Let's try again. And Murder, She Wrote, and Magnum P.I. So again, the classic 70s and 80s TV shows are just going to start coming out a bit more. Lou Ayres plays Jason Burke, and he starred in All Quiet on the Western Front and other classical movies as well. So I've got down here the neutral characters. Now, so these are like the town folk, and you get slowly introduced to these guys as the movie goes on. They're not necessarily bad. They're not necessarily good. You know, you kind of work out who's who you like, who you don't like. That's the kind of the gist of it. So you got Julie Cobb, and she plays Bonnie Sawyer, and she's done a lot of, again, small roles in the 70s and 80s pretty much after that. George D'Souza is Cully Sawyer and plays the husband. And he was in Stargate, the movie. He's in Species 2. He's in Dangerous Minds, and he's in Basic Instinct. So he went on to do some interesting roles. Marjorie Glick, who's the Australian actress, Clarissa Mason. Yeah, we'd known her from Bangkok Hilton, the Ned Kelly movie with Mick Jagger, and Skippy. She's done a few episodes, so yeah, good on her. Jeffrey Lewis plays Mike Riverson, and again, a lot of 70s and 80s TV shows and straight to DVD movies. Fred Willard plays Larry Crockett, and yeah, instantly seeing him in the thing, you know him from Modern Family, Anchorman, and also Space Force, which I've been watching as well, which is quite funny. And then there's James Galloway, who's played Father Donald Cullen. Again, a lot of 80s and 70s TV shows. Then you've got the Glick boys. So you've got Danny Glick, played by Brad Savage. I almost said fucking Fred Savage then. Brad Savage. Again, a lot of 70s and 80s bot TV shows after this. And then there's Ronnie Scribner, and he plays Ralphie Click. So he plays the little boy in the pajamas, the first one to start tapping on the glass. And again, as soon as you say Salem's Lot, the first two things that come into people's minds is Count Barlow, and then the kid tapping on the glass. Like every time, it's just ingrained in pop culture, referenced in Eminem, 8 Mile Road, like that refers to where he comes from as Salem's Lot. The Simpsons, Bart's like floating in the window, tapping on the glass for Lisa. It's there's just countless references to it. And then What We Do in the Shadows, Peter the vampire looks exactly the same in that sense. So Salem's Lot got a lot of nods. Basically also really inspired, if you think about it, Fright Night. There's a lot of bits in here when you're looking, especially at the end when they're doing the confrontational thing, they go in to get the vampire, and you're going, wow, there's a lot of Fright Night going on along here. Even the staircase scene, there's a lot of Fright Night nods, and Fright Night is kind of gone, oh, okay, hasn't openly copied it, but you could tell very much a fan of this, and so they gave a nod by replicating some of these scenes and adding their own twist to it. So you could definitely see the homages there. Lost Boys as well. So, and then you got the evil characters. So basically, Barlow is played by Reggie Nalder. This guy was really interesting to follow up. He had some burns and scarring and stuff, and again, it was kind of hard to kind of track what had gone down with this guy. But because of his facial features and kind of being pointy and stuff like that, he was always slammed as a villain. It's and in a lot of movies, he was in Hitchcock's A Man Who Knew Too Much, and so he played a villain in that. And then it's kind of all these other movies, he always played a bad guy. So so they got him to play Barlow. The poor guy struggled a lot because of the makeup and the lighting and what they were using as opposed to what we'd use now. It was very uncomfortable, and a lot of his like paint and stuff was peeling, like his facial makeup was peeling off. They had to do multiple takes because of it. But the worst of all was his eyes. The prosthetics to get these things in was so painful that they'd do a scene and he'd have to take him out because his eyes were just getting absolutely tortured. So yeah, you know, the level of sacrifice these actors did back in the day to really deliver a great performance, and something as scary as you know, when I think of a scary vampire, you think of Nosferatu, and just the snarling noises he makes all the time, like these really nasal snarls, and it's nothing you really hear from any kind of creature really in like a horror villain aspect. It's really unusual. So anyway, we're kind of moving on from that, and then you got Straker, which is James Mason, who plays this kind of toffee familiar for the vampire, and I like this guy. I like him as a villain because he's got that kind of "you can't touch me" attitude because he's the favorite for the master. He's kind of untouchable. He's like, you know, my boss will kind of fuck you up. So he's got this attitude of, you can do whatever you think you want to do, but I'll just say the word and he'll just absolutely rip you to pieces. So he's got that instance of "you can't touch me" kind of arrogance through this thing, and plus he's, you know, well-to-do and he's a bit snooty. So you add all these together and you get this really pompous, annoying, calculating villain. So it's pretty. He did a great job, and it's while doing the research of the show, the writer specifically had him in mind to play this character. So when he approached James, he jumped at the chance. He goes, "I'd love to do a character like this. I'd love to do this." So he's played many characters before. He's done I think Iron Eagle or Iron Cross. He played a German officer. Like, this guy's done a range of stuff. So to play this familiar in this movie is really well done too. So when you put all this together, then you get Toby Hooper behind it doing the directing. I mean, it's kind of a, you know, this winning combination, and you get this phenomenal horror film. And so basically the general gist of Salem's Lot is Ben Mears is an author, and he goes back to his childhood town of Jerusalem. So Ben Mears, like I said, he's back. He's an author now, and he's back in the town, and he's writing a book about the Marston House, which is where this vampire is now renting with. Well, the familiar's got it. He's opening up an antique shop as a front for his master, and he's the favorite, and this is basically what they do. And they go around and they hit a town, they open up an antique store, you know, pretty much when you think of that, immediately you think of Needful Things. Ironically enough, Bonnie also films in that as well. So I just kind of thought that the tie-ins were quite interesting. And when you see some of these scenes where the people are going in and they're looking at these antiques, and especially Petrie's mum looks at that antique and it's just like, oh, I really want to have it. And I was kind of thinking, oh shit, you know, Needful Things. It's kind of, so I was kind of interested to think, okay, maybe back in the 70s, I wonder if Stephen King, when he was writing this, he was kind of going, oh shit, okay, here's a bit of a side story. Let's, you know, some guy opens an antique shop, you know, I was kind of intrigued, and I'd like to ask Stephen King if that was accidentally where Needful Things actually came from. So that was, yeah, it's one of the things. So anyway, he's there. He's researching for his book, and in the meantime, he meets up with Dr. Norton's daughter Bonnie, and they strike up a relationship. So there's your love interest in the thing. And at the school, he goes to visit his old school teacher, and that's where he sees Mark Petrie, and the Glick Boys are also on stage, and they're doing a production about the Revolutionary War and Salems Lot's involvement in the Revolutionary War. And so that's where you kind of see the Glick Boys at the start. And like I said, as this movie goes along, it gives you snippets and pieces of a family or a cast member or the cop or the priest, or you know, the realtors and what's his name, the Sawyers. It goes into the Sawyers. So she's back home from work. He's kind of being sus about it because he's now thinking, okay, my wife's cheating on me and having an affair. So there's that inner story happening there. There's the Glick family and their little inner story there, and then the constable and his little inner story there. So all these little things are going on, and the way it's done, it's done so well that it doesn't make you lose what you're focusing on in the film. It's just really good character building, but not smashed over your head, that you're sitting there for 25 minutes getting this massive info dump on one dude that you just got to forget about in half an hour. This is so really kind of inspiring. Directors and writers really need to look at this style and say, hey, this is kind of the blueprint how to do it. Because a lot of movies now are all about the info dump, and they overdo the info dump to the point where you're just like, for fuck's sake, like, you know, I come home from work, I just want to turn my brain off and eat some popcorn, drink a beer, switch my brain off, and I've got this movie where I feel like I need to go to fucking 6 years of uni to get to understand what is going on. It's just getting way too complicated now. And this like I said, this movie is a good example that you can have really good character development without pissing on about it. And so they do it really well in this. So as the movie goes on, we then see that Stryker moves into the town. He's now setting up his antiques thing. He's now getting those local guys together to help him move things, and has offered them money in order to do this. So he gets Larry Crockett, and he gets Cully Sawyer to help him out. And also, and I didn't grab his name on the list here, but Bonnie's ex-husband as well. And they've split up, so that creates a tension in the between him and Ben Mears. And there's a fucking mate. The great thing about Salems Lot, and I tell you what, now I've seen this movie about probably 6 times now. Now the 7th time to review in order to review this. So I look at it differently when I'm reviewing a film. Mate, I tell you, the jump scares in this thing are still fucking pretty decent, and there's a few that really got me by surprise. And one of them was the spring attack, and it wasn't even a vampire. He was the jealous ex-husband jumps Ben Mears, and the fucking way he does it, and I didn't even know it was going to happen, and I fucking almost wore my beer on me. It made me jump. I didn't expect it at all. I was like, holy shit, I don't remember this scene at all. But so seeing it for the first time, you're going to jump out of your pants, because the way this guy hides and jumps out at him to crack him, going, you're having a shot at my wife kind of thing. It was just like, holy, it wasn't even a horror scene. It was just the way it happened. It just really took me by surprise. But then when you add all the horror jump scares in this thing, you jump a few times in this, and it's really well done. So again, notes to budding directors and stuff like this. This is how you do a jump scare, because there was no music before this or whatever. It was just a normal scene. Ben was just walking around a room, like just like nothing is going on. Bang, he just gets jumped, and you're just like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, wow, it's pretty impressive. And again, you know, you're not expecting some things, and you get it, and you're just like, oh shit. Like, so it's Salem's Lot still gets it. It still scares you, it still makes you jump, and it still creeps you out. So this is why I love this movie so much. It's really, really good. And so basically, as the movie goes on, he encounters the townspeople. He remembers an incident that happens at the Marston house when he was 10. And it's like, you know, there's something evil entity lurking in this house. Like, and so that kind of gets touched on. And then as the movie goes on, it becomes Ben investigating with with Petrie and with his school teacher, with Jason and Bonnie and Dr. Newton as well, Norton. They all team up together and go through this thing. And this is where I said it becomes accidentally, unintentionally, a Starsky and Hutch episode almost, of this vampire in a seaside town, or why is everyone dying of anemia all of a sudden in this seaside town. And so that was the thing. And then Barlow, it kicks off. Like, and we see him, he's attacking everyone openly now. Like, that scene in the kitchen where, you know, a family sitting together, they're discussing something, and the priest is there, and he just bang through the window, like, and then just stands and just rises above it. It's just, fuck, it still scares the shit. Not, okay, that's a bit dramatic. It's still creepy enough, like, and I just go, fuck, like, but the thing, there's a dialogue piece of scene that I didn't get until I saw Chapelwaite, and then I went, there it is. And it's really well done. So the priest is holding the cross up. Stryker, like I said, is being an arrogant dickhead, going, oh yeah, what is the master? What are you going to do with this thing? Like, you know, he's just talking shit on the sidelines. And then he says, okay, priest, you let the young boy go, and it's your faith against his faith. And I was kind of going, what faith does a vampire have? Like, that's a bit weird. Like, and even as a kid, I was like, hang on, faith? Like, the fuck? He's not worshipping Satan. Like, he's not a Satanist. What would he worship? Like, a vampire, as far as they're concerned, they're it. Everyone worships them. Like, there's no, you know, and I thought that was a bit odd. And I didn't think much about it, thinking as the movie went on, and, you know, as I grew up and kept watching the movie, I never really thought about it. And then sitting again to watch this, I was thinking, hang on a second, I think Chapelwaite kind of touches on this, and I thought, okay, so watched the movie, paused it, went back to Chapelwaite. Now, you've got to watch this film in episode 5. Half an hour into this, he meets the master, in the main character of Chapelwaite, meets the master, and I'll get into who that is in a minute. And the master talks about how this whole thing kicks off in Salem's Lot, right? And how the origins of Salem's Lot, and how it's not a religion per se, but it's an entity that he kind of worships as well. And so this vampire would too, but it predates Christianity, and so that's why he's like, yeah, you know, you can try your thing with the crosses, but it doesn't bother the master. Like, the other vampires, it seems to freak them out for some reason, and that kind of, I wasn't really 100% sure why that was the case. But then again, I thought, it's a movie, just don't, I can, you know, have a stroke over it. So I just kind of moved on. But I just thought, yeah, okay, I didn't quite get the difference between that one. And then, yeah. So when he said that, and then I watched Chapelwaite, it makes sense why he turns around and says, "Okay, your faith against his faith," because at the end of the day, Barlow is worshipping this thing like that has created him, and then has gone and again created the vampires under him. So there's a ranking with these creatures. So I thought that was interesting. And so the whole thing goes down in the kitchen, and it's all these kind of, you know, little snippet classic scary elements that add up to make Salem's Lot quite good with the suspense and with the horror, and delivering the horror at the right time, and then pulling back, and then delivering it, and then pulling back. And that's pretty much what Salem's Lot is. And for a 3 hour and 20-minute movie, including credits, it runs incredibly well. It's not fast paced. The pacing of it is spot on. And I mean, like I said, I've seen this movie like 7 times now, and I wasn't bored shitless. And this was a 3 hour movie. And so that, it just shows you how it still gets your attention, even though you've seen it multiple times. And you will pick things up that you may have missed on a couple of things. So again, the dialogue about the master and the faith thing. So basically the big showdown at the end. So the start of Salem's Lot starts in Guatemala, and then it ends in Guatemala, and the events of Salem's Lot is pre-Guatemala. So you get the Guatemala scene at the end, where it's Ben and Mark Petrie together in Guatemala. And so that's how it starts, that's how it ends, kind of. I'm not really going to go on from there, because I don't want to release some... There's some major bits in there, and I don't want to spoil it, and I'm going to leave that one out. But that's kind of where it sits. So that's really Salem's Lot for that one there. And the book I haven't read in a long time, so I can't really say if it marries well with the book. If you've read the book and you remember, please chime in the comments whether you think it's the same thing, like if it's done it justice or not. But like I said, Toby Hooper was a great choice of director for this, because you've seen some other Stephen King horror films. They've done the directors and it's gone to shit, because the director hasn't done Stephen King justice on this one, except the current Stephen King films that have come out. They've done Stephen King's vision quite well, and they've honoured him that way. So that's good. Chapelwaite, I'll just briefly touch on now. So it's Adrian Brody plays Captain Boone, and it's set in 1850 in a town called Preacher's Corner. And so this town is next to Salem's Lot. So, and it's... Salem's Lot has already had some shit gone down in it already. So you kind of get the gist that, you know, Salem's Lot's had its problems even back then. And especially with this kind of vampiric, godlike creature thing that seems to be ruling the show. In Chapelwaite, it mentions that Salem's Lot was founded by a miner, and I mean a miner, like not some kid, like, oh, I'm going to call this place Salem's Lot, like, you know, and that voice was fucking creepy then. So apologies about that. A miner goes in. Turns out that the miner's name was James Boone, so it was Captain Boone's great grandfather that started the town, because he uncovered while mining a ancient text about this thing that they referred to as the worm, and this creature makes people into vampires. I'm hearing this, and I'm thinking the serpent one with very young Hugh Grant, or the Lair of the Snake, or anyway. And I'm just thinking of it now. I'm thinking, hang on, is this kind of, there's a connection here? Like, it's a bit weird because that's another one that's a vampiric thing and they refer to it as a worm. Like, anyway, so I'm not not going massively off topic there. Um, the so yeah, Chapelwaite. That's basically what it's about. So James Boone, he finds this text and decides to cut himself and bleed and write and add his own bits because he wants to be a part of this creature's lore or whatever. And as a punishment, it curses him and it curses the bloodline down. So every kid after that then becomes stricken with these visions and all this kind of stuff. And there's the Master Jacob, so spelt Jakub, played by Christopher Hillel. Now, this guy here always plays either someone good, but usually always a villainous character. And he's tall and bold. And because of his features, he got the gig. And you would know him from Arrow, Gotham, Falling Skies, True Blood, Sanctuary is where I first met him, and Supernatural. A fair idea who he is, and he plays Jacob in this thing. And so this character is just as equally as menacing as Count Barlow in Salem's Lot. And you kind of he explains in this sit down, this info dump in episode 5, about half an hour into it, about how Salem's Lot is now come to be. So then it moves on with the rest of the story for Chapelwaite. So you, as a fan of Salem's Lot, you get the mention and it moves on. Like, it doesn't. That's it. That's what you get. And then Chapelwaite's his own film. So, and that's good in that sense. So then that way you know roughly the prequel to how Salem's Lot came about. And it was an interesting one how they did it. I thought it was really good. When you look at Chapelwaite, it's an interesting one because if you've watched the movie Midnight Mass, the similar, like, it so flies the same that it's you could almost mistake it for the same thing. And so it's a quite an amazing TV show. So very, very recommended. This is amazing TV show. I've been pumping through them. The episodes are about 40 minutes or 50 minutes long. It's rated M15. First time horror film, absolutely. It's a definite recommend. It's good. It's that mixture of scary, but it's not terrifying, and you will enjoy it for sure. So definitely get on Stan and check that one out for sure. And like I said, it does a very good nod to Salem's Lot, and so it just sets up the whole explanation of what is going on, because the movie Salem's Lot is kind of a bit of an open-ender, and I'd say that was probably done deliberately because of the TV show side of it. Like, it was a TV movie, like not necessarily a film. So I think the idea would have been maybe that it went on to be a film, but it just turned out to be that was it, Salem's Lot. It has been remade in the 2000s, and Rob Lowe played Ben Miz's character, and it was shot in Queensland in Australia, so it has countless Australian actors in it putting on really not so great American accents. One of the characters, funnily enough, is the Glick Boys' mum, and it's played by Rebecca Gibney. So if you want to see Rebecca Gibney as a vampire, check it out. It's a good one. But mate, there's some standout scenes in Salem's Lot, and one is Mrs. Glick when she comes back as a vampire and she jumps and her face changes. Holy shit! And then she gets whacked with a cross, and her face she just goes like this, and I still have that image got burned into my brain as a younger kid. Like I've said countless times before in the episodes, I used to go on Friday nights to town, and then I used to go to the comic shop inside the city, and I used to go through and I used to read through Fangoria, and the Fangoria had a thing on Salem's Lot one day, and one of the major pictures was that picture, and it just got burned in my brain. It scared the shit out of me. Like, I almost like dropped the magazine, because when I flicked it, I just came face to face with it, and it scared me so much. And now looking back at it as a horror fan, phenomenal scene. But as a kid, like, or someone growing up watching this movie, it just major heebies, major heebies. And the other iconic scene of of the kid tapping on the glass. There you go. But again, another one of the best Stephen King movies for sure. And again, it and Pet Sematary come a very close second for me. It was going to be a very long episode if I covered all three movies, so I just thought I'd stick with the one. And so definite recommends for all of them. Happy birthday, Stephen King. Thank you very much for scaring the absolute bananas off everyone for this long, and good on you. We nearly lost you a few years ago to that being run over, but you came back and you've managed to pump out some more classic horror. I feel really bad with my procrastination. Sometimes I'm like, I really can't be fucking doing anything. And then I think to myself, you know what? Stephen King wrote fucking a novel while he was on drugs in hospital, recovering because his pelvis got twisted in being run over. I'm like, shit. Like, what excuse do I have? Like, get off my ass. Like, stop procrastinating, mate. So, yeah, anyway. It is what it is. Last week's episode, the last episode was fantastic, which I enjoyed, which was the Zombie Bite episode, where I had the SA Ghostbusters, Ruby and Charlotte over, which was really great. So definitely check that out. If you're in Adelaide and you're interested in joining the SA Ghostbusters, definitely look them up on Facebook. It's a great cause. Like, they do great work for charity. They're looking for members. It'd be awesome if you came and joined it. Like I said, no gatekeeping twats there, so you can just pretty much rock up and say, look, I like Ghostbusters. They're not going to smash over the head with what one did you like, or anything like that, or tell you to rattle off dialogue. It's nothing like that. If you just generally like the film franchise and you've got a bit of a passion and you want to help charities, help them out by joining up and making the difference in the community. Another thing that was really cool that I managed to happen to me in between the last episodes, when I covered the episode 29, which was the NAIDOC Indigenous Horror episode. I was talking about Firebite, which was the local SA vampire show. And Shanika, who's the character, but played by Chantel Barnes-Cohen, she came through my work. So I work at the airport, and so I managed to see her, and I was a bit starstruck, but at the same time, I'm kind of reluctant meeting people because you don't know how they're going to act, and especially where I work. People are so focused on other things that they're not gonna, they don't expect someone to come up and say, "Hey, liked your movie." So I'm a bit funny and a bit shy in that regard. But it was really cool. I kind of sucked up some energy and some confidence, and I went there and I said, look, Firebite was a phenomenal TV show. I just really thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to the next season. And it's quite funny because her character has this black hat on the whole time and she doesn't smile. Like, she just looked up at me and she goes, "Thank you." Like, and she just lit up and she just, this amazing smile that came across her face. And I was like, oh shit. Like, and I was really, really happy to meet her. I thought that was really cool to see her in person. And again, looking forward to season 2 of that, so that would be pretty cool. Anyway, that's enough for me on those fronts, and hope you're all doing well. Please excuse my footy, my sneaking in my 2 footy teams that won grand finals over the last week and a bit. So yeah, very very happy. Very rare situation, I've got to say. So I'm just fucking taking it. I'm taking the win, boys. So that's pretty good. I'm quite happy to. Football wise, it's been a good year for me. So that's good outside of the crypt and outside of horror movies. So yeah, pretty stoked about that. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Please go out and check out Salems Lot if you haven't. Definite recommend. Like I said, YouTube, you can rent it and that, and also definitely Chapelwaite. You can check on Stan as well. And so yes, thank you and stay scary, and I'll see you in the crypt. Welcome to the Adelaide Horror Podcast. I'm Zombie Joe and I host themed episodes on horror movies, old and new. Catch episodes of Zombie Bite, a segment where I shuffle out of the crypt and interview local artists in and around Adelaide to do with the horror genre. Do you have another horror podcast and would like to collaborate? Don't hesitate to summon me. You can do so on Instagram, the Facebook group, and via email at adelaidehorrorpodcast@gmail.com. Stay scary, and I'll see you in the crypt.